We know it. And it's indeed, it's a very interesting question, not due to those people who like to earn money, what most people do, but I think one problem that digital tools do not get into the healthcare system as they should go, in Germany of course like this, is that you don't have a price tag for digital therapies or digital drugs, digital tools, whatever. And so this is a very, very important question just in the business, the digital business development into the healthcare system. I have a couple of intro slides, and then I think we'll have a very, very interesting discussion with Markus König and Julia Rohde. I will introduce them later. And the question, how to make money with data. The first time I thought about the question, what about making money with data, was in 2012 when I met some guys from Marine Software. Marine Software is a company, they do nothing with health, but they support Google by putting price tags on Google AdWords. So if you want to go to Google and use Google AdWords, you have to pay for the keywords, and they give Google the price for each keyword you use at Google AdWords. And the question in 2012 was, what is the most expensive keyword used for Google AdWords in 2012? And it was mesothelioma. That was the most expensive word. And why was it the most expensive word? You probably do not know what mesothelioma is. Mesothelioma is the kind of lung cancer you have if you work with asbestos. And if you work with asbestos and you get lung cancer, it's completely clear you are not guilty, but there's somebody who is guilty. But the question is, do you find the guy or the company who is guilty because they worked with asbestos and made you exposed to asbestos? Or do you need a lawyer who helps you to get the money? And if you used the keyword asbestos, you got this on Google. So they could find the lawyer who bring you about $10 million if you succeed in the with the lawyer's things. And as we know, the lawyer gets 50%. So it's of course, a very expensive keyword if you earn $5 million if the lawyer would find some of the patients. So that's not really health data, but it's a lot of money with health data. But let's say nowadays there are other companies who work with data and make money out of their data, and one of the companies is MySugar, you probably know. It's a diabetes management platform, and they can, if you suffer from diabetes, you can let's say, document all your insulin stuff and your blood glucose, and you get a lot of advices how to live with diabetes and how to manage your meals and how to manage your life and maybe other diseases which you have if you have diabetes. And if you have some figures for MySugar, it's about 1.4 million registered users. A lot of downloads per day, a lot of data points. I think they've got meanwhile 1.5 billion on the 1 billion data points. They use Apollo's calculator, so they help the diabetes patient to do everything. And they offer coaching and test drives, and that's what is reimbursed by the health insurance company. The health insurance company reimburse the service that out of these data points, MySugar can exactly knows exactly if a new patient goes on the platform. MySugar knows exactly if a patient is at risk to get into hospital or is at risk to suffer from coma and has to go to the emergency room or whatever. So the data out of these billions of data points is used to generate a business model. So MySugar says, okay, I know if Mr. Miller is a new guy on my platform, I see one week of documenting his blood sugar, blood glucose level and the insulin doses, so they know exactly, because they have a lot of digital twins for each patient who's coming new to this platform, they know exactly if the patient will suffer from, let's say, diabetes coma, and then they go to the health insurance company and tell the health insurance company, okay, do you want to pay 3,000 to 6,000 euros for a patient suffering from diabetes coma, and go to the hospital, or shall we try to prevent these patients from getting into the hospital and prevent the health insurance company from paying a lot of money? Another company who works with data is Flatiron Health. You probably know Flatiron Health is a hospital information system which is specialized on oncology data, and they did a very smart thing. They developed an information system specialized on oncology, and then they gave it nearly for free to all the hospitals and all the cancer research and cancer treatment centers in the States. And what then happened, everybody liked to use this, and the deal was we give you the information system nearly for free, and you pay with the data of the patients. So Flatiron Health has about 2.5 million patients on their platform, which are under treatment. So they have the biggest platform, the biggest, let's say, the biggest amount of data with real-world data for patients suffering from cancer, and they know exactly what kind of patient treated with this drug maybe become a better outcome, I guess a better outcome than treated with this drug. And what they say, and that's very clear, we know what's going to happen in the real life. You have, of course, you have the data from clinical trials, but the patients used in clinical trials, as we all know, are not the patients you have later in the real world of cancer treatment. And they do a lot of things to have these data clear to work with the data. Everybody thinks that Iron Health uses, let's say, a lot of artificial intelligence to have these unstructured data you usually get from hospitals to come from unstructured data to structured data. But if you talk to Iron Health, they say, okay, we do a little bit of AI, but what they have about 1,000 people working on data, just bringing unstructured data into structured data. And what they do they sell this data to pharma companies, and the pharma companies can work out their strategies with this data, let's say, to get market access to their new drugs and to compare old drugs and old treatment regimes with these new things. And of course, it was very interesting for one special pharma company, as maybe you know, they were acquired by Flatiron Health for about $2 billion. So that's the kind, you have data, you have a data company, and then it's a kind of the value of the company, and then you can make business, and maybe you are bought by another company. As you probably know, Roche did not only buy Flatiron, they also bought My Sugar. So Roche may be on the way to be a data-based pharma company. But that's, let's say, that's normal, that's going to work, but that's not the new business. The new business is coming from these companies, and the next generation data business is to prepare to build data marketplace, and that's very interesting. That's very interesting because these data marketplace work with the patient's data, and they buy the data from the patient directly. So that's not let's say a second thing. So you have a platform, and then you get the data like My Sugar, and then you use the data to make own business. These are companies who talk to the patient, go to the patient, say, hey, you can give me your data, and we give you money or tokens, whatever, for data. That's very interesting. That's very interesting due to two things. On the one hand, the patient is the only one who has the whole data set if he collects his data in a proper way. And the second thing is, if you ask anybody in the world, everybody will tell you the data belongs to the patient. Not to the doctor, not to the healthcare insurance company, to the patient. But nobody thinks about the fact that what will happen if the patient will sell the data. So there are not real price tags for these data. But if you know that, for example, if you take Facebook, and you know the business model for Facebook, you know that if Facebook's users have some medical condition, the data are more expensive if the patient has no medical condition, but just, let's say, a car driver or something, some other consumer aspects. So we know health data are very expensive, and these companies say, okay, we buy the data directly from the patient, and the patient might use it for having, I don't know, a nicer holiday. This is named economics, and they buy it directly, as I told you. Then we have exactly business model you can see on the website, so it's very, very professional. We have other companies who have the same model, so that's not a single idea from one company. That's about, I think we have about 10 companies over the world where you can sell your data, and you get for the data you get tokens, or you get money, or you get a perfect health record for free, whatever. So several models, or some companies give you a gene editing thing, or gene editing, gene diagnosis for free. So there are several business models. This was the only price list I found. Let's say there are tokens, but so they say, okay, if you use the medical record of this company, you have to pay something, but if you connect your wearable, then you get 10 of these tokens, and if you use Apple Health, you get 25 of this. So there are real business models now being established with data and with these companies. Humanity is a company who said, okay, the market for data, patient data, will be, or not will be, is today about $300 billion. So it's a huge market, so everybody wants to earn money, may think about this. And the question is, why are health data so valuable? Okay, that's because you can feature your research, and you can do a lot of business when you develop drugs. But there's one reason, and the reason is that health data is the only global currency. It does not matter if you take a blood sample from somebody living in the North Pole or somebody living in the south of Africa. If they have an anemia, it's all the same. So, and if you think about let's say 3 billion people living in the world, and you have one currency, and with this currency you can do a lot of business, so it's very, very interesting. I think this is a new era we are now starting with the companies who don't talk about we have the data and we sell it or we do better business. That's the data selling business is the business model which underlies all these companies. And now I'm very interested about your vision on that, or view on this, and how do you work with your data. And so I want to introduce Julia Rode. She's from Preventicus. She just the international business at Preventicus. I would like to ask you to give a short intro to Preventicus. It's a very interesting company with a lot of data, and they use your data, what I know, in the first step, just to prove that the tool really works. And another very interesting guy is Markus König. He's from the investment side. Because the question is also, when is a company as valuable that you give money to a company? So we have two very interesting people here to learn about, let's say, the emerging way how to go with data, and what about data and pure medicine and data and investment. So Julia, may I ask you to give a short intro to Preventicus, and then what's your view concerning Preventicus on data? It's not this model, but what's your model?
So, yeah, my name is Julia. I'm actually working for Preventicus. We earn money with data. That's our business model. What we do is actually to collect data via an algorithm based on smartphone or smartwatches, and to prevent strokes. So there are 1.1 million strokes in Europe per year. It's 45 billion costs per year. And we would like to reduce it because we can reduce these strokes by 70% if we screen the right people at the right time, at the right moment. So our business model is not simply selling an app and measuring something, because that's not going to work. You need to combine the measurement with the program. You have to implement the insurances, you have to implement the Ministry of Health, and altogether you can get the screening done, you can get a good program rollout, and this is what we also presented to the European Union, where we got several fundings for studies to make sure that our concept works. We rolled it out in Germany, very successful, working with health insurances, because we can show the health insurance that we save money with this concept, even if they pay us for rolling it out. And we can show the patients that it really helps them. So screening in high-risk population really reduces their risks. We started with stroke, What we are going to continue with is blood pressure, sleeping apnea, so all these cardiovascular diseases you can easily measure without an ECG, but with a PPG sensor of your smartwatches and smartphones. Everybody has a smartphone today, so it really works pretty well. It's cheap, it's free for the patient, and this is how we earn our money with data.
Okay, so you go to the health insurance company, tell the health insurance company, we have the data, and you pay a lot of money for patients suffering from stroke, and then you say, okay, our price is X, and your price for stroke patient is Y. So how does it work? Do the health insurance companies believe in your data? You have to, let's say, you have to prove that your data are, let's say, correctly measured.
Yeah. So first of all, it's not simply an app. It's a medical device class 2A, so it has to be certified as a medical device. That's the first point. The second point here is that you have to have the economic value study. If you don't prove the economic value, they will not buy it. Therefore, you have to prove, yes, with this data, with this algorithm I programmed, I can really detect the right people. So best comparison, Apple, 400,000 patients. Big trial, big thing. Finally, they came up with 450 patients they could prove with a so-called PPV, positive predictive value of 70%. Means they sent 100 patients to a doctor saying, you might have atrial fibrillation, but only 70% really have that. Means very high cost for health insurance because they have to send a patient to the checkup. So they would not buy into such a program if the PPV is so low. You need to have a high positive predictive value. And that's what you have to prove in your clinical trials. Yes, it's nice that it works, but if you would like to really build the data and measure in a program, you have to have very good data, and that takes a lot of money and time. So, for example, Preventicus has a predictive value of 98 to 99%. Means we find patients, we send them to the cardiologist, and 99 of 100 really have atrial fibrillation. So for the health insurance, that's good money saved.
Okay. The company's later is very interesting. I didn't know that Preventicus is better than Apple. I hoped it to be because I knew Preventicus, but I didn't know. Okay, so very interesting. Maybe we dive a bit deeper into this after this session. Marcus, you work at a very interesting company that's called Signals. And Signals is a subsidiary from the Signal, which is a private healthcare insurance company, and they used to invest in tech companies, and now they start to invest in healthcare companies. I know you're not a healthcare specialist, but you came from another very interesting company. What I would like to know is first about your experience on companies who, let's say, go on the way to be perfect in data analytics. Is this, let's say, how important is this for you if you give them a lot of money? Is it, let's say, the first thing or the second thing? What about money in your scope of let's say, of due diligences concerning tech companies and maybe even healthcare companies?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having us. I work for Signals Venture Capital, which is a 100 million vehicle that was set up by Signal. So we are a purely financially driven investor. We invest in early stage companies, meaning seed, Series A and Series B companies that ideally have or generate first revenues. We invest in three major areas, and that is enterprise software, that is healthcare, and that is also fin and insurtech. To give you some kind of understanding what are companies that we look at, we just invested in a company called MedBell, which is a consumer marketplace for beauty surgeries, but they also build an operating system for healthcare operators in the back end. I previously was at a company called KPN Ventures, which is the corporate venture capital investment arm of the Dutch telco in Amsterdam, and there we also invested in e-health companies, and there one company that we looked at was Sensata, which is a software provider for elderly care. So if your grandmom goes to the toilet every morning at 7 a.m. and then on Friday she only wakes up at 7, then the healthcare provider or the caregiver would get alert, right? And then another company that's completely different would be Sentience, which is a company, an SDK kit in the field of predictive behavior, right? So it, for example, works together with mobility providers like Uber, but it could also work together with insurance providers and healthcare in the sense that it can predict what you are going to do in one day, in 1 week, in 1 month, right? And that gives a lot of insights that are data-driven. So coming back to our company, we mainly invest in companies that are data-driven. We call that the datafication of enterprises. SAP calls that the intelligent enterprise. And the reason is that we see a lot of value in the stuff that can either increase enterprise efficiency, meaning to automate processes, to augment doctors, GPs. I think of it like in the sense that we want to make doctors superheroes, and also would like to look at stuff that has to do with how can I decrease information asymmetries between the company and suppliers, insurers, but also within the company. And I think that's quite an interesting field. You ask how important is data for the stuff that we look at. I think it's essential. I like to think of technology in waves, right? And in the 1950s it was mainframe computers in companies like IBM, and then there was software, and then there was the internet with big platform players like Google, and now we move into an era where everything is data-driven, and it hasn't stopped yet. If you think of stuff like DLTs and blockchain technology in order to store maybe even healthcare data. If you think about stuff like or like authenticate myself as a user, I think that's very, very interesting. And I personally believe that companies have to think of data like we thought of computers 20 years ago. And if you don't have some kind of exposure to data analytics and to machine learning as a company, you're doing something wrong today.
If you would advise a startup who wants to get into the medical field, and of course the data-driven medical field, what would be let's say a crucial number of employees or founders which with skills? So what kind of skills do you need if you want to build out a data company? Is it let's say the nerd with the thinking day and night on data, or is it, let's say, another kind of skill you need if you want to build a company which, let's say, monetizes data really?
Yeah, actually both, right? So if you build a machine learning driven company, you need a data expert. You need the right balance between a software engineer and someone that has a research background in machine learning and artificial intelligence. But at the same time, you also need a CEO that has execution capabilities, that can really push everybody in the company, that has a clear vision, and very often that's an industry expert, and that can obviously be also somebody from the healthcare industry. At the same time, people that haven't worked in one specific industry are sometimes or can be quite naive, and they are very likelier to challenge the status quo, right? And that gives them a different approach on how to tackle a market, how to tackle a business model, how to collect data and collaborate with other parties. And I think that's also quite interesting. I think it's a case by case decision. Every company is different.
What kind of skills you've got mentors?
Yeah. So I would say A, you have to have a good idea for sure. B, you have to have time and money. And C, you carefully have to look at where you would like to start. Germany, for example, is a very difficult country to start. Looking at the digitalization index, Europe is really far behind. Germany placed 11 within Europe. So Scandinavia, a good thing to go to because they are really far off UK, good place to start with. So look at what you can do, where you are strong at, and then find the right financial partner, because you will have to have a little breath. And for that one, you need money. So find the right financial partner and the right place to start.
So if you want to make money with data, so first you need the data. And now we can, let's say, you get the data from the patient, and we know we have German and the European data protection law. You're going to internationalize. So what countries are, let's say, maybe easier to get into concerning data acquisition and data business?
I would say everything is easier than Germany. From our perspective, what we see when you have all the players together. So it's not only data protection. It's when you work with health insurances, they have their own internal processes, how to protect data. They are not allowed to see any patient data. So how can you collect the data, but then, run the programs with the insurance, and then finally get, for example, Bitmark to send the bills. So you have to find a way how to protect the data so that the patient still owns the data, nobody else has access to the data, which we finally made. We even sell that to the insurances if they don't have our program. Germany is a good country. When it runs in Germany, it runs almost everywhere, because the system here is really quite complex when it comes to data, patient data, insurance payment, and all the different data protection rules.
So you talked about artificial intelligence, machine learning. Everybody says, okay, we do machine learning. How do you, like I said, make sure that if somebody tells, okay, we have the best AI specialist, what every startup tells us, how do you make sure that they're really on the right way concerning AI and machine learning? Are there, let's say, special capabilities you ask them to prove, or what are the key questions as an investor if you want to, let's say, make sure that they can go the right way with the data?
Yeah, so I have a business background, so I'm not a pure tech guy. But of course, it's quite easy to filter through the companies that we're looking at. And honestly, 95% of what we look at in machine learning is bullshit. It's not machine learning, it's basic data analytics, and it's just a trend today that stuff that has AI or machine learning on it just sells better. When we are looking at a company in the due diligence phase, we typically hire somebody to really look at everything in tech stack, meaning where is the source coming from, what's the data source, is it copied from somewhere, but also stuff like, is there a right balance between what I already mentioned, the researchers in the team, software engineers, do they have a good understanding of the data sets they're looking to apply, because machine learning is basically like a snowballing system, right? You collect data and then you clean the data and you train the data and you do it again and again. And it's quite easy to filter through that noise, I think.
So we talked about the business model in business with health insurance company. Let's say patients suffering from atrial fibrillation, they need a lot of drugs. They need one drug, but it's very, very expensive. So what is your experience in, let's say, in business with pharma companies who might be very happy to have a lot of patient diagnosed with atrial fibrillation because they can sell their drugs, which is about, I don't know, €1,000 a year?
We actually partner with them. So for them it is very difficult to get access to the health insurances because they normally say you only want to sell our drugs. But we need them because they don't open the doors for us to really all the patients and GPs who will have to, work for the adherence. So even if we find a patient, it's not a guarantee that they really take their pills. So we need the pharma companies for the long-term run to make sure that they do their job for the adherence of the medication.
One question we ask ourselves, if we have, let's say, the business models, we pay for your data on the one hand, and everybody is now in Germany talking about data donation. So I give you the data for free because it's due to research. What do you think if you have 100 patients? How many will, let's say, donate the data? And how many will, let's say, expect money for the data?
Especially in Germany, I think donation as well as money is in the low percentages, simply because everybody is really scared. So the typical German Angst thing we see widely, and we had the luck that hospitals gave us access to their data to prove our algorithms, because otherwise you will not find a good algorithm or artificial intelligence if you don't have the data to prove it. So we haven't seen any patient really donating data yet, even if we ask them or pay for it. No, not yet.
Any idea?
Yeah, it's also a very personal question. I wouldn't give away my personal data, right? Why would you do that? So it's not really, I think, a question to ask the patient, but to ask the companies. And companies, including healthcare providers, GPs, insurance providers, they very often think of data as the new oil, right? How often do you read in Times magazine, data is the new oil? But for me, it doesn't make sense to think of data in that sense, because oil is something that you use and you burn through it and it's gone, right? Data works differently. Data works like a big Windrad, what is that in English? Windmill, exactly. You use it and then it goes to the next windmill and it can still generate the same energy. So I think it's very important to share data between companies, and that has different variables, right? You can anonymous data, you can also personal data, anonymous. You can share data sets in the sense that X-ray pictures are labeled, right? You can share that publicly. If you think of enterprise software and open source initiatives, I think that's very important in the future, but you can't ask a patient to share their personal health information. I think that's stupid.
Okay, very interesting. So, open to the public, any questions to Marcus or anybody else? You can think about it, we'll come back later. Okay.
Where do you get your data from when you don't get it from your patients in your German initiative?
Okay, so for programming the algorithm, you actually use clinical trials, so that you go to a center. We have several centers in Europe where we use patient data, but for sure anonymized, which we can prove the algorithms we program with. Until now, as we went like B2C and B2B models, so since we sold the app the first time, we have more than 4 million measurements done. So now we can use our own database. But until then, before we would have proven the product, we would have used all the different center data from hospitals who said to us, okay, we believe in you, so we do a clinical trial with you, and then you can use the data to prove the algorithm.
If you talk to your users or your patients, do they ask what are you doing with my data, or let's say is it just only a small amount of patients who make us believe that they want to have a complete secure environment and that they don't want to have the data shared with other people? Is it a very interesting thing for patients considering data and handling it?
Yeah, it is, and it is also a very crucial point when it comes to running the app. As some of you might know, we have a change in law as of June 1st, where we can sign into those programs online. We don't have to put a signature on their paper and send it back. So that already helps, but that also makes data protection more difficult because we now have to put all the different things into the app. So it has to be even more safe than before. A lot of patients are asking. What we see is that in the first 4 weeks when they sign in, we have a lot of people stepping back from the contract, saying, I'm not sure what to do with my data. So they start screening, they start measuring, and then they say, but I'm not really sure, it's an app, and that mostly happens when we have a news article about data land.
Okay. So is there something you would like to tell Mr. Schwan, who is our Minister of Health, concerning this problem that a patient, you want to, let's say, you want to help a patient to suffer from a stroke, and there seems to be something which prevents the patient from being prevented from strokes. Is that the idea for the next digital health law?
Yeah, definitely. So all the different laws we have and all the different regulations we have stand in each other's way. So make it easy, make it straightforward, and I also think that data protection in general, we are overprotected. That's what I personally think. You can say yes or no to donate your data, but to anonymize data and anonymize it again and again, and every physician then has to look at the anonymized number into the patient and then combine it, and then going back to the health insurance, another anonymization process. That simply is too much. That's my personal view.
Okay, so we will tell Mr. Schmal, we'll see you next. So thanks a lot. I think we have discussed, as I told you, we don't have the answer how to make money with data. But I just want to share a typical German story concerning data. Last December we had a delegation tour to New York with guys from the Ministry of Health and with the very famous people from the German healthcare system. And we visited the Mount Sinai Hospital, and we met there the CIO of Mount Sinai Hospital. And the first thing he said, okay, welcome Germany. I just want to tell you, we spend about 300 million euros only in this hospital on IT, and we have a lot of people, 1,000 people working on IT, most of them in India. And that was the first shock moment for the German delegation, how much money you can spend on IT. But I want to focus on was then the CEO said, okay, every patient coming to a hospital, we use the data from every patient coming to the hospital. They identify the patient data, so nobody knows from which patient data come. And then we use the data and do our analytics thing. And one of it was, let's say, the most famous healthcare professional in Germany. He said, okay, Mr. CIO, there's one question. If I want to be treated in your hospital, and I stand in your hospital, and the first thing I tell you, hey, I want to be treated in Mount Sinai Hospital, which is a very famous hospital with their perfect doctors, but there's one thing I want to tell you, do not use my data. So I refuse that you use my data. Would you treat me although I refuse? And the answer from the CEO was, nobody has ever asked this question. And so we know we come from Germany. So it may improve, and I think we have a lot of capabilities in Germany, and maybe Mr. Spahner's next digital law will help us to get the data. But also I think data protection is very important. I don't like the idea that the patient selling the data, suffering from diseases, and the treatment of the disease is not paid by the patient, but all the other patients or all the other insured patients. So I think there will be a conflict arising concerning data, and the conflict is not protection. The conflict may be a very, let's say, deep problem inside the question. If the society is responsible that everybody gets the right treatment for his disease, is then the individual allowed to sell his data? I think this will be a very interesting discussion in the next years. I thank you very much for being here, and enjoy the debate. And if we have to solve the problem until next year, visit us next year, maybe we hear you again. Thank you very much, and bye.